Welcome along to the deep dive. This is where we grab a whole bunch of sources, could be articles, research, our own notes, and basically boil them down to the key insights for you.
Mhm.
The goal is pretty simple, really. Give you a clear path to getting genuinely informed, maybe with a few surprising bits and, enough to chew on.
Yeah.
Today, we're doing what we call a reformed thinking deep dive. We're mainly looking at John Piper's thoughts from his piece, Do Not Be Angry, Embrace Mercy and Forgiveness.
Right.
And we've got some other notes and research mixed in, too. Our mission really is to unpack what Jesus taught about anger, about forgiveness, and, well, what discipleship actually looks like in practice.
Yeah.
It's something that affects all of us, isn't it? Dealing with that anger, sometimes it just floods in, and then trying to show grace when it feels really hard.
It's a really vital conversation to have. What we're hoping to do is really think through how these scriptural truths aren't just, theological ideas for debate,
Right.
but how they actually connect to our everyday lives, the actual stuff we deal with. And as we get into it, you'll see that when we talk about handling anger, understanding God's mercy isn't just like a helpful tip.
Mm-hmm.
It's the absolute center. It's the bedrock reality
Mm-hmm.
that kind of shifts everything, our whole perspective, how we react.
Okay, so let's jump in then with this, well, pretty radical call to forgive. We can start with that exchange between Peter, one of Jesus's inner circle, and Jesus himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Matthew 18. Peter comes up and asks something that, seems pretty fair. He says, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times.
Okay.
Now, if you think about that for a second, Peter offering to forgive someone 7 times in that culture, that was how he sounded really generous, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. More than generous.
Yeah.
Probably.
Forgiving someone not just once, but 7 distinct times, that's way beyond what most of us might even think of doing naturally today. It shows he's willing to give quite a bit of grace.
It really does. Peter's question shows he's thinking about it, about how people keep messing up, how offenses happen again and again in relationships. He's wrestling with the practical side of forgiveness.
Right.
But then Jesus's answer to this, seemingly very generous offer from Peter, it's just startling. He says, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7.
70 times 7.
Yeah. And it's really crucial to get this. He's not giving a maths problem here. You don't start a tally chart and stop at 490.
No, right.
No, that's definitely not it. It's a figure of speech, a way of saying unlimited, continuous, just boundless forgiveness.
Wow.
What Jesus is getting at is that forgiveness should just keep coming, no limit, no end point. It's about having an unending posture of mercy, more like a state of being than counting offenses.
A state of being.
Yeah, it's not just forgiving one thing, but cultivating a whole spirit of forgiveness. It just flows, reflecting God himself.
Okay, but that command, 70 times 7, it immediately makes you think, doesn't it? Because, in real life, when someone hurts you not just once, but again and again, like the 10th time, the 20th time, what feels like the 490th time, how on earth is that kind of boundless forgiveness even possible? It just feels impossible, way beyond our natural ability for patience.
Yeah, it pushes us for sure.
It really does. And that's the tension, the practical problem that Jesus then speaks right into. He doesn't just drop the command and walk away. He gives a path towards it through a story. He gets our limitations.
Exactly. And what's really interesting here is how Jesus immediately connects this instruction, this seemingly impossible command, to the kingdom of heaven. That's Matthew 18, verse 23.
Okay, the kingdom.
Yes. And linking it to the kingdom tells us something super important. It tells us that overcoming anger through real, ongoing forgiveness isn't just some psychological trick for getting along better.
Right, not just self-help.
Not at all. It's explicitly part of God's rule, his kingdom, working in the lives of his people. It's not something we just drum up with willpower. This kind of forgiveness is God working in us.
Okay.
It's a direct result, a fruit of the forgiveness Jesus won for us with his own sacrifice. Remember in Matthew 26, he talks about his blood being poured out for the forgiveness of sins.
Right, right.
So this boundless forgiveness, it's fundamentally a spiritual thing, rooted in what God did first, not just us trying hard. To live out 70 times 7 is to live out the reality of God's saving work in your life.
That's a really key difference. It shifts it entirely from my effort to God's work in me.
Precisely.
And that flows perfectly into this story, the parable of mammoth mercy, as some call it. The unforgiving servant. It's right there in Matthew 18, verses 23 to 35. And it's Jesus's answer, isn't it, to Peter's question. Okay, but how? How do I actually do this level of forgiveness? It illustrates the how.
Yes, and Jesus starts this parable with a debt that is just Staggering. He talks about a servant who owes his king 10,000 talents.
10,000 talents.
Yeah, and to get a feel for how much that is, you need a little context.
Yep.
Think about King Herod, a pretty wealthy guy, right? His entire yearly income was maybe about 900 talents.
Only 900. Wow.
Yeah. Or, take the taxes from whole regions like Galilee and Perea back then. That only brought in about 200 talents a year.
So 10,000 is astronomical.
It's basically off the charts. It's almost incalculable by normal standards. The sources suggest maybe Jesus was exaggerating massively on purpose, like saying a gazillion dollars today, just to show an impossible amount.
Okay.
Or maybe it meant this servant was a really high-up official who'd been skimming huge amounts off the top for years. Embezzlement on a grand scale.
Right.
Either way, the point is, it's a debt no human could ever possibly repay. It would take, I don't know, tens of thousands of years for a normal worker to earn that. It's meant to show a debt beyond any hope of settlement.
And then what happens is just as amazing, this act of pure grace. The servant, he's totally sunk. The king's talking about selling him his wife, his kids, everything, just to get something back.
He falls down, begs the master for patience, makes this kind of impossible promise to pay it all back.
Which he obviously couldn't.
Right. But then Matthew 18.27 says, out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt.
Forgave it, all of it.
Just wiped clean. And the forgiveness is as huge, as overwhelming as the debt itself. And that's the point, isn't it? Jesus wants you to see that our sin against God, the way we've ignored him, broken his ways, lived for ourselves.
Yeah.
That's an unbelievable debt. We could never pay it back. No amount of saying sorry or trying to be good could ever fix the dishonor. It's this mammoth mercy from the king, this incredible act of divine grace. It points straight to God forgiving us, totally undeserved, unearned, just breathtaking forgiveness.
Yeah. Now this is where this story takes a really shocking turn. The servant who just got this incredible, undeserved, you'd think heart-melting forgiveness. Jesus doesn't say, he even says thank you.
No mention of gratitude.
None. Instead, the same servant walks out, finds another servant who owes him, comparatively, peanuts, 100 denarii. Okay, how much is that?
Well, 1 denarius was basically a day's pay for a field worker. So maybe 100 days' wages. Compare that to a debt needing thousands of years to repay.
Right, it's tiny in comparison.
Tiny. And what does the first servant do? He grabs the guy, starts choking him, demanding the money back now.
Choking him, seriously.
Yeah, physically aggressive, refuses any patience, even though he just received infinite patience himself. And then he has the poor guy thrown into debtor's prison until he can pay it back.
Wow.
The truly mind-blowing thing is how this massive experience of forgiveness he just had didn't change him one bit. Didn't soften his heart at all.
It had no effect.
None. The grace he got didn't flow through him. He was still just angry and looking out for number one.
So what happens next? The king finds out.
He does. And he is quite rightly furious. Matthew 18.34 says the king calls the servant back in.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, he confronts him. You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt just because you begged me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, just like I had mercy on you?
That's the logical conclusion, isn't it?
It is. And then the king, in his righteous anger, hands him over to the jailers, the torturers, until he pays back the original massive debt.
Which is impossible.
Exactly. It condemns him forever. It's a really stark picture of the consequences of refusing to show mercy.
So what's the punchline from Jesus?
The conclusion Jesus draws in verse 35, it hits right at the connection between anger, forgiveness, and our actual standing with God. He says, so also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is. It means God, our King, isn't obligated to save someone who says they're a disciple if that person hasn't really received God's forgiveness for what it is, this infinitely precious, totally undeserved, heartbreakingly humbling, mercy-sparking gift.
So forgiveness doesn't flow out of us?
Then the source suggests God's forgiveness hasn't truly taken root in us. If there's no sweetness of forgiveness towards others in our hearts, it's a sign something's wrong. That divine forgiveness we claim, if it doesn't make us forgiving people, it won't actually save us in the end.
It's like a diagnostic test, almost.
In a way, yes. An unforgiving spirit reveals we haven't really understood or embraced the grace we say we've received from God.
Okay, so what's the big takeaway for us then, practically speaking? How does this help us deal with our own anger?
The key insight here is that living with this constant, amazed awareness of our own massive forgiveness, that huge log debt God canceled for us, That is what enables us to forgive others their tiny speck debts against us.
Right. Keeping our own debt in view.
Exactly. Think about it. God's righteous anger against us, it's gone, dealt with through Christ, even though we've sinned against him way more than 70 times 7. Truly grasping that, living in that reality, it cultivates what the sources call a broken, contrite, tenderhearted joy.
A tenderhearted joy. I like that.
Yeah, and it's that specific kind of joy born from humility and gratitude for God's mercy that then governs our anger. It stops it from becoming destructive, like the unforgiving servant's anger. It changes our whole inner world.
Okay, that makes sense. Living in light of our forgiveness fuels forgiveness for others.
Precisely.
Now, this idea of being aware of our own debt, our own forgiven state, it ties directly into another really famous teaching of Jesus, doesn't it? The one about judging others.
Yes, absolutely. The speck in the log.
Exactly. Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 to 5. Jesus says, "Judge not, that you be not judged. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when there is the log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." It's such a vivid picture.
It really is unforgettable. And it's important to be clear on what Jesus is forbidding here. He's not saying we can never make any kind of judgment or assessment.
Right, because later he talks about identifying false prophets.
Exactly. That requires discernment. What he's condemning here is hypocritical judgmentalism.
Yeah.
Being laser focused on other people's small faults while being totally blind to our own massive ones.
Okay.
But notice, he does say, first take the log out, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out. So he's showing there's a right way to help someone with their fault.
So there's a proper kind of judgment.
Yes, a necessary, kind, corrective kind. It's different from just condemning someone. It aims to help, to restore. But you can only do that kind of careful surgery if you can see clearly.
And you can't see clearly with a log in your eye.
Precisely. Your own big issue has to be dealt with first, by God's grace, before you have the moral clarity and the right motive to help someone else with their smaller issue.
So that log in our eye, that's a symbol for.
It clearly represents our own huge sinfulness, our own desperate, ongoing need for God's mercy and forgiveness. It's our log debt, you could say.
Like the 10,000 talents again.
Exactly like that. An immense debt of sin we owe God. And the speck is then our brother's much smaller fault, their speck debt, maybe a minor offense or character flaw compared to our log.
The image just forces you to see the massive difference in scale, doesn't it? It's humbling.
It's designed to be humbling, to make us pause before we rush to point fingers.
And you can tie this right back to the unforgiving servant, can't you?
Absolutely. His complete failure to remember his own log debt, that forgiven 10,000 talents, that's exactly why he couldn't forgive his brother's little speck debt of 100 denarii.
He lost perspective entirely.
He did. His lack of self-awareness about his own need and his own forgiven status blinded him. It shows how ignoring our own sin, failing to grasp God's mercy to us, directly fuels anger and harshness towards others. It's a total disconnect.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This anger that comes from being judgmental, that critical spirit, Jesus says it's broken by a truly broken heart.
Yes, and that doesn't mean just feeling sad for a moment.
Right, not superficial.
No, it's a deep internal shift. This brokenness comes from living constantly aware of our own deep sinfulness and knowing that only Jesus' mercy, his free grace, can remove that log from our eye. Forgiveness and healing.
So it's recognizing our total dependence on him.
Total dependence, moment by moment. And that kind of spiritual brokenness, it's not weakness. It's the source of real strength when it comes to showing mercy.
So what's the result of that? How does it change things?
Well, the outcome of really living in that awareness of our own forgiven log debt is huge. It transforms that angry judgment, that urge to condemn, into something totally different. Patient, loving forbearance. And it makes delicate, helpful correction possible.
Because you're not coming from a place of superiority.
Exactly. You see, even if there's a legitimate reason for some kind of anger, maybe righteous anger about real wrongdoing, it's now governed by your own experience of mercy. It's not hypocritical or self-righteous anymore. Piper makes the point, you just can't do delicate eye surgery on someone's speck if you've got a massive log blocking your own view. Your perception is just warped until your own bigger issue is dealt with by Christ's mercy.
That allows you to see others with compassion then.
Yes, compassion, understanding, and a genuine desire for their good, not just a desire to be right or to punish.
Okay. So we've looked at anger from being hurt repeatedly and anger from judging others. What about that other common kind of anger, the type that flares up when someone tells us what to do?
Oh, yes. When we just don't want to do it, or it messes up our plans.
Yeah, that feeling of resistance, maybe resentment, happens all the time, doesn't it? The sources say this is often rooted in pride.
hmm A pride that doesn't really have a sense of duty, or maybe more importantly, any joy in serving others. It's that instant, I don't want to feeling that can just curdle our mood.
So how does Jesus address that?
Well, his call to discipleship hits it head on. Being his follower means embracing self-denial and taking up your cross. Matthew 16:24. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me.
Deny yourself. Take up your cross.
Right. And Jesus modeled it perfectly. He went to the cross to die for others. Ultimate service. He calls us to follow him, even if it means suffering, serving, laying down our own plans and preferences for others for his sake.
So being ready for that changes things.
It fosters a spirit of servanthood that just doesn't get bent out of shape when demands come along. It fundamentally changes our internal default setting from resist to willing.
And Jesus uses that really striking phrase for this, doesn't he? Slave of all.
Yes, incredibly radical. Mark 10, verses 44 and 45. Whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.
Not served, but serve. Ransom.
It means we're not our own boss anymore. We belong to Jesus. What he asks, we do. Otherwise, we might hear him say, like in Luke 6, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you?"
It's about allegiance flowing from gratitude.
Exactly. When you grasp, he served us even to death, it changes your posture.
Martin Luther had something great on this, didn't he? About freedom and service.
Oh, beautifully put. Back in 1520, Luther said, "A Christian man is the most free lord of all and subject to none. A Christian man is the most dutiful servant of all and subject to everyone."
Wow. Free lord, yet dutiful servant.
It captures that paradox, doesn't it? This amazing freedom we have in Christ is found precisely in being bound to him, in willingly putting ourselves at others' disposal out of love for him. It's not a burden, it's a joyful response.
And how does that spirit, that mindset, actually shield us from anger?
Well, it just completely reframes our emotional response. If you truly see yourself as a slave of all for Christ's sake, knowing your life isn't just yours to control, then when someone asks you to do something unexpected, something inconvenient,
Your reaction is different.
totally different than if you saw yourself as Lord of all, entitled to your own time and plans. It's a fundamental shift. For Jesus' sake, the source says, the slave rejoices to serve the good of others, even people who don't deserve it, even when it's costly.
It becomes an act of worship.
Yes, a living sacrifice submitted to him. That joy in serving, rather than prideful resistance, diffuses the anger that often comes with demands.
So even if anger does arise, if it's going to be good anger,
Then it's governed by the contentment Jesus gives us in serving. It's not bitterness about being put out. It's maybe a desire for God's will, for justice, even if it costs us personally. It's directed outward at wrong, not inward in protest against serving.
Okay, this is all really helpful in understanding the roots and remedies for anger. But let's circle back to that very direct command in Matthew 5. Everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment.
Right.
That sounds incredibly sweeping. What specific kind of anger is Jesus actually forbidding there? Is he saying any feeling of anger is sinful?
That's the crucial question. The sources explain that Jesus is really drilling down deeper than the command not to murder. He's condemning not just the act, but the feeling, the malicious intent behind the act.
Okay, so the feeling itself.
The prohibited anger, Piper defines it as a strong feeling of displeasure, including feelings of contempt and hostility that seek expression in murder or pejorative name-calling.
Contempt and hostility, seeking expression.
It's anger that holds ill will, that wants to demean someone, put them down, or ultimately destroy them, maybe physically, maybe just relationally. All anger like that, anger that carries the seed of destruction or belittling others, that's absolutely forbidden. It attacks relationships and our standing with God at the core.
So just to be crystal clear then, based on that definition, it doesn't mean all anger, no matter what, is automatically bad or sinful.
No, the sources are clear. Jesus does not condemn all anger. We know this because Jesus himself got angry.
Yeah.
Mark 3:5 says, he looked at the Pharisees with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart.
Ah, right. His own example.
Exactly. The key distinction comes from his other teachings about love, about responding proportionately, about God's care, about his mercy, about being servants. Those things guide us in figuring out if our anger is justified, if it's righteous.
Okay.
Good anger, righteous anger, is shaped by a humble heart, a heart that knows it's been forgiven a massive debt itself. That kind of broken, grateful heart leads to that tenderhearted joy we talked about.
And that transforms the anger.
It transforms judgmental anger into patient, loving forbearance. Righteous anger isn't about me getting my way or getting revenge. It serves a higher purpose, honoring God, flowing from love for Him and for others.
Can you give some examples? Like, what's unrighteous versus righteous anger look like?
Sure. Unrighteous anger, the forbidden kind, would be things like looking down on someone with contempt, feeling outright hostile towards them, being harshly judgmental out of self-righteousness, or that prideful resistance to serving. It's anger trying to hurt or control out of selfishness.
Okay. And righteous.
Righteous anger or good anger would be totally different. It might be displeasure when you see sin or injustice, those eye specks messing up people you love,
Yeah.
or when truth is twisted or God's name is dishonored.
But it's different because...
Because it's always governed by mercy. It comes from that heart broken by God's forgiveness. And its goal is always loving correction and restoration, never destruction. It's pure, seeking God's good and the real good of others, even if that means confronting sin. It's proportionate and tempered by love.
This whole way of thinking about anger and forgiveness, it feels incredibly radical. The command not to have that destructive anger, the command to forgive limitlessly, it feels almost crushing, doesn't it? So far beyond what feels natural. It really brings you face to face with a huge demand, which leads to the biggest question. How is this kind of deep internal change even possible for us? How can we actually live like this?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer the sources give is that this demand forces us to see we just can't do it on our own.
Right, not by willpower.
Not by sheer willpower or making resolutions. We can't just decide, okay, starting now, I won't get angry like that anymore, or I'll forgive everyone, everything. It doesn't work like that.
I know.
Because getting angry or failing to forgive isn't just an isolated choice we make. It's described as fruit on the branch of our lives.
Fruit on the branch, meaning?
Meaning our anger, our ability to forgive, our whole way of being, it grows out of something deeper inside us. It comes from our core, from the source of our spiritual life. It's an outward sign of what's going on internally. It's the kind of person we are.
So the real question isn't, how do I try harder?
No. The real question becomes, what vine am I connected to?
Ah.
Whose life is flowing into me, and therefore, whose fruit am I going to bear? Fruit like peace, patience, kindness, and forgiveness.
Okay, so that leads directly to?
John 15, verse 5,
Yeah.
absolutely central. Jesus says, whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing.
Apart from me, you can do nothing.
That's it. So the demand not to be angry in that destructive way, and the demand to forgive 70 times 7, it's also fundamentally a demand to abide in Jesus, to stay connected to him as our life source.
So it's about the connection.
It's all about that ongoing connection, that intimate, moment-by-moment fellowship with Christ, praying, reading his word, obeying him, being part of his people. That is the real source of power to quiet that unrighteous anger and bear the fruit of forgiveness and peace.
It's not a technique then.
No, it's not a self-help strategy. It's a supernatural work of God's Spirit inside us as we cling to Christ. When we're drawing life from him, our hearts get reshaped, our desires change, and our ability to forgive is supernaturally empowered.
So just to sum that up, real change in handling anger and practicing forgiveness doesn't come from just trying harder.
Right.
It comes from depending completely on Christ, staying connected to him as the vine, the source of life. That's reformed thinking in action, isn't it? Seeing our total need for God's grace and his Spirit to change us from the inside out.
Exactly. That's the core.
Okay, so as we kind of draw this deep dive to a close, let's pull the main threads together. We started with that radical call to boundless forgiveness, 70 times 7, and we saw that's grounded in being totally amazed by God's own huge mercy to us for our massive sin debt.
Right. The forgiven debt empowers forgiveness.
Then we looked at meeting real self-awareness, getting the log out of our own eye before worrying about the speck in someone else's. That leads to a brokenness before God that turns judgment into compassion.
Yeah, seeing clearly starts with seeing ourselves rightly.
And we talked about how embracing joyful servanthood, being slave of all for Christ, shields us from anger rooted in pride when demands are made on us.
It changes our whole orientation from entitlement to service.
And finally, we made that key distinction between the unrighteous anger Jesus forbids, the contempt and hostility, and a possible righteous anger that's governed by mercy and aims for restoration.
Understanding that difference is critical.
It really is.
Yeah.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to take away and mull over. If our forgiveness towards others is meant to truly reflect the boundless mercy we ourselves have received from Christ, how might holding on to that perspective, day by day, moment by moment, actually reshape how you react, how you engage in your relationships? Really consider what it means to live, not just intellectually agree, but live as someone deeply forgiven by God, and how that might compel you from the heart to extend that same undeserved gift to others around you, no matter the situation.